All right, ready to dive deep. Today we're exploring this awesome piece of writing. It's all about, well, making spirituality practical. Like, how do we take those mindful vibes from, say, yoga and actually use them in everyday life?
Yeah, the piece goes right for that question. It's saying that even the most ordinary stuff, those little moments, that's where big spiritual growth can happen.
That's what I struggle with. It's like, how do I not lose my chill the second I'm off the yoga mat?
Right.
This piece has some wild ideas. Like, literally, our thoughts shape the world around us. And get this, it says our relationships are like mirrors, showing us parts of ourselves we don't even realize are there.
The thing that grabs me is how it says interconnectedness isn't just some vague idea. It actually, does stuff. You can see the effects.
Okay, I'll admit, sometimes when I hear interconnectedness, I kind of zone out.
Yeah, it could sound a little,
But this piece made it real with this example. Like, imagine you smile at a random person on the street.
Right.
That tiny thing, that smile, we can start this whole ripple effect of good stuff.
Like a chain reaction. You brighten someone's day, and maybe they're nicer to the next person, and on and on.
But then the piece flips it. It's like, okay, think about the ripples from bad actions, too. Like, when
Yeah.
you litter, right, you just toss something without thinking.
Yeah.
But it has this impact we don't see on the environment, animals, even places far away from where you drop that, like, gum wrapper.
It makes you realize that even the little things we do, they all add up to the bigger picture. It all matters.
It made me think, am I making the world better or just adding to the mess?
That's what the piece is pushing us to face. And it goes even deeper. It says our thoughts and even feelings, like our energy, they actually shape our reality.
Yeah.
It asks us straight up, what kind of reality are you creating?
I used to think that was a little too out there,
Yeah.
But the way this piece explains it, it clicked. Like, if we're always thinking negative stuff, no wonder our lives feel that way.
That's the heart of it, is like realizing we have this power, but also that means responsibility. Our inner world, it affects everything around us.
It's like we're not just watching our lives happen, we're kind of making them happen. And it's not just about, getting rich or whatever.
Right.
It's about the energy we bring to our relationships, our jobs, even just how we experience the world.
Exactly. And that takes us to another big idea from the piece. It says spiritual awakening, it's not about escaping from daily life. It's about living it more fully, but with awareness.
It's funny, I used to think spirituality was all about retreats and meditation and all that. Like, gotta get away from the real world to be spiritual.
Yeah.
But this piece is like, no, the real test is right here, right now. In traffic, at work, dealing with annoying people, all that.
It uses this great comparison on the mat versus off the mat behavior. You can know all the spiritual stuff in your head, but can you actually use it when you step off that yoga mat back into the chaos of life?
So true. It's easy to be zen when everything's calm and controlled.
Yeah.
But how do you stay aware and present when you're stressed or frustrated?
And that's where the piece says awareness itself is the key. Not just noticing your breath or body, but your thoughts, feelings, the stories you tell yourself, all of it.
This is where I get lost. It's like, be more aware. Okay, but how? Do I just sit around analyzing every thought that pops up?
Not exactly. The piece has some really practical tips for building that awareness in daily life. One thing it suggests is just taking little pauses throughout the day.
Oh, okay.
Stop, breathe, feel what's going on in your body, and notice your thoughts. No judgment, just observe them.
I can see how that could be huge. Like hitting the reset button so you're not just on autopilot all the time.
Being more present. And that leads us to, honestly, one of the coolest ideas in the piece. It says our relationships are mirrors, reflecting back to us parts of our own consciousness.
I've heard that before, but I always thought it was just a metaphor. How does the piece actually explain that?
It gives some examples that are really relatable. Let's say you're always annoyed by someone you work with. The piece says, take a step back. Ask yourself, what's going on inside ME that's making me react this way? Is it insecurity, fear? Do you need to be more in control?
Instead of blaming them, you look at yourself. That's a big shift.
And it goes even further. It's like, instead of just reacting automatically when things are tough, use those moments to practice awareness.
So if someone's pushing my buttons, I don't just explode. I pause, take a breath, and ask, what's happening inside me right now? What story am I telling myself about this?
Exactly. And just that little pause, becoming aware of how you feel, it can change the whole interaction.
That's amazing. Like, you're in control of your emotions instead of them controlling you. And speaking of control, the piece has some interesting things to say about work, too. Now, work and spirituality, they don't always seem like they go together.
That's where the piece challenges us. It says work can actually be a chance for spiritual practice.
Wait, spiritual practice at work?
Mm.
I don't think my boss wants me, like, chanting in my cubicle.
Haha. Not quite. It's more about bringing those same ideas of awareness, intention, and compassion that we use in our personal spiritual stuff into our work lives.
So not just going through the motions. You do your work with purpose, and you're present, no matter what the task is.
Yeah. It's about making even boring tasks meaningful, like giving your full attention to a report, being real with coworkers, even just finding little ways to make things better.
So it's not the job itself, it's how you approach it.
Yeah.
I like that. But what if your job just feels wrong? Like it goes against your values? What does the piece say about that?
It gets that. Feeling stuck in a job that feels meaningless or even soul-crushing, that's tough. It says honesty and awareness are key. Don't ignore those bad feelings, but don't let them consume you either.
So acknowledge them, but don't get stuck. Then what?
From there, you can start making choices. Maybe talk to your boss about a different role, look for a new job, or find ways to make your current work more meaningful.
It's cool how it emphasizes that we can create meaning even in simple tasks.
And that leads to a bigger question the piece gets into.
Yeah.
Purpose.
Yeah, that's a big one, especially for people on a spiritual path. Like, you got to find your life purpose, this big hidden thing.
Right. But the piece flips that. It says purpose isn't something you find, it's something you create.
Whoa, I like that. So it's not about finding this predetermined path. It's about making choices that feel right to you and bring you joy.
And about showing up fully in each moment, bringing more love, more awareness, more beauty into the world in your own way.
That's beautiful. Okay, so we've talked about interconnectedness, thoughts shaping reality, awareness, relationships as mirrors, and even finding purpose in our work. What else is in this piece?
Well, we can't talk about spirituality without talking about the ego. This piece has this really interesting concept, the spiritual ego.
Oh, the ego. Always sneaks in somehow.
Right, and what the piece points out is that even our spiritual practices, the things you do to grow, they can actually feed the ego instead of leading to real change.
So how do we know if we're falling into that trap?
The piece asks this powerful question. How might your spiritual beliefs or practices be serving your ego rather than facilitating genuine growth?
Ooh, that's one to think about.
Like it says, sometimes we use spiritual ideas to avoid dealing with tough emotions or relationships, or we feel superior because we do certain practices. It even warns about spiritual materialism, collecting spiritual experiences or knowledge like trophies without actually changing our lives.
Yeah, I think we've all seen that at some point.
The key, like the piece says, is to notice these patterns and be honest about how our ego might be messing with our growth.
That's a perfect segue into another topic the piece talks about, shadow work. I'll be honest, I tend to avoid that stuff. It's not always fun facing your dark side.
I hear you. But the piece makes a good case for why shadow work is important. It says that what we push down doesn't just go away. It hides and affects us without us realizing it, and often it messes with our happiness.
Can you give an example? That whole shadow thing can be hard to understand.
Sure. Imagine someone who pushes down their anger because they think spiritual people shouldn't get angry. That anger might turn into passive aggression, resentment, or even depression.
So it's not about letting those negative feelings take over.
No.
It's about seeing them, understanding them, and expressing them in a healthy way.
Exactly. Shadow work is about bringing those hidden parts of ourselves into the light so we can integrate them and be whole.
It sounds intense.
Yeah.
Does the piece give any advice on how to do shadow work?
It does, and it emphasizes that even though the spiritual journey is personal, we don't have to do it alone. Community is the big part of growing.
So finding people who get it, to support you. But doesn't it also warn about, like, blindly following a group without thinking for yourself?
It does. It says it's important to trust your own gut feeling. Your path is yours, ultimately.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Interconnectedness, thoughts creating reality, awareness, relationships as mirrors, purpose in work, the spiritual ego, and even shadow work. Where do we go from here?
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll get into even more stuff from this piece. We'll talk about spiritual bypassing and how spirit and matter are connected. Stay tuned.
I'm excited. This has already been eye-opening. Listeners, stick with us as we keep exploring this amazing piece.
Welcome back. So before we jump into some of the heavier stuff from this piece, let's go back to something we talked about before, relationships as mirrors.
That one really got me thinking. It's such a basic idea, but when you really think about it, it changes how you see all your interactions.
The piece really digs into that. It says like every interaction, even just bumping into someone, gives you these insights into your own consciousness.
I get that for close relationships like family or your partner, but does it really apply to every single interaction? Even just like passing a stranger on the street?
That's what the piece says.
Yeah.
Think about it. Every person you meet, they make you feel something, right? Could be happy, annoyed, judgy, even just nothing.
Okay. Yeah.
So instead of just going with that automatic reaction, you can stop for a second and ask, what's this telling me about myself?
Like, why am I feeling this way?
Exactly. It's like you're holding up a mirror to your own inner world. Like imagine you're walking and you see someone dressed in a way you think is totally crazy.
Haha, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, what are they thinking?
Instead of writing them off as weird or whatever, the piece says, ask yourself, why does this bother me so much? What about their style is pushing my buttons?
Maybe they're so bold it makes you feel insecure, or their style reminds you of something you don't like about yourself.
Exactly. Those little moments can show you so much about your own beliefs and values, even those shadow parts we were talking about.
It's kind of freaky when you think about it. Every interaction, even if it's quick, can be like a spiritual practice if you pay attention.
And the piece gives you tools to actually do that.
Yeah.
The one that I really liked is this idea of like really listening in conversations.
Oh man, I am so bad at that.
Yeah.
My mind is already on like what I'm going to say next instead of actually hearing them.
It's tough, for sure. But the piece says deep listening is one of the best things you can do for someone.
It's like you're saying, I see you, I hear you, you matter.
And it's not just the words. It's their body language, their tone, the feeling behind what they're saying. You're listening with your whole self.
Like a kind of meditation,
Yeah.
right? Bringing that same stillness you practice to your conversations.
Yeah, exactly. And that changes your relationships, but it also helps you understand yourself better.
Because when you really listen to someone, you're listening to yourself too.
Yeah.
You notice your own reactions and judgments.
Right. And that awareness is super important for this whole spiritual ego thing. We touched on it before, but it's worth digging deeper.
Yeah, I think we've all fallen into that trap, even if we didn't know it at the time.
The piece says the spiritual ego is that part of you that's proud of being spiritual. It's the voice that says you're better than others because you meditate, eat a certain way, or believe certain things.
Or you use spirituality to avoid dealing with hard stuff.
Exactly. It's like hiding behind spirituality to escape the mess of life. The piece calls this spiritual bypassing. It might make you feel better for a bit, but it stops you from doing the real work.
Because real growth means being honest, facing those shadow parts, and accepting all of life, the good and the bad.
Absolutely. And speaking of shadow work, something the piece really stressed was using discernment to navigate all this.
Discernment. That word gets used a lot. What does it actually mean here?
It's about knowing the difference between what your ego wants and what your true self wants. It's about seeing when you're falling into old habits, letting fear or judgment control you.
So developing that inner wisdom to make choices that are right for you.
Exactly. And that's something you have to work on through self-reflection, mindfulness, and being honest with yourself.
Okay, but how do we actually do that in our daily lives? Any tips?
Yeah. The piece suggests starting by paying attention to that voice in your head. What stories are you telling yourself about you, other people, the world? Are they true, or are they based on fear, judgments, old beliefs?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times those negative thoughts are just running in the background, shaping everything without us realizing it.
The piece also says to practice mindfulness in how you interact with others. Pay attention to how you react to different people and situations. It can show you your own biases and what triggers you.
Like using your relationships to learn about yourself.
And lastly, it says to find wise people you trust and ask for their guidance. Could be a therapist, teacher, mentor, even a close friend who can help you see your blind spots.
Like having someone hold up a mirror for you, but in a kind and honest way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how you use discernment well, with compassion and a willingness to see yourself clearly.
This is also helpful. I'm already thinking about how to use this stuff in my life.
It's amazing how much wisdom is packed into this piece. And there's more.
Wait, there's more. I'm in.
In the last part of our deep dive, we're going to get into even deeper stuff, like how the piece sees the connection between spirit and matter.
I can't wait to see where this goes next. Listeners, stick with us for the final part of our exploration. All right, back for the final part of our deep dive into this amazing piece on making spirituality real. Still thinking about that idea of relationships being like mirrors, showing us who we are.
Powerful stuff, right? And it connects to this other idea the piece talks about, spiritual bypassing.
Yeah, you mentioned that before. I'm still not totally clear on what it means. It sounds like, maybe, using spirituality as an excuse to avoid dealing with problems.
You got it. The piece says it's like using spiritual ideas or practices to avoid feeling bad or facing old wounds or even just basic needs.
So it's using spirituality as a shield to hide from the hard parts of life. I can see how that would be tempting when things are tough,
Oh, totally. And it might seem like it works, You feel more peaceful, less bothered by your problems. But the piece says that's only temporary.
because the problems are still there under the surface, right?
Exactly. And they can come out in unhealthy ways. Like the piece gives this example of someone who uses meditation to push down their anger instead of actually dealing with it.
Okay.
Then that anger might come out in passive aggressive ways or even make them sick.
So it's not about pretending you don't have those difficult emotions.
Yeah.
It's about learning to work through them in a healthy way with awareness and compassion.
That's it. Real spiritual growth means embracing all of it, the good and the bad.
It's like you can't grow a garden if you only water the flowers and ignore the weeds. The weeds will just take over.
Love that analogy. And that brings us to another cool point the piece makes. It's about how spirit and matter are related. A lot of people think spirituality is about leaving the material world behind.
Right, like money is bad, stuff is a distraction, and the body is just something temporary for the soul to use.
Yeah. But this piece has a totally different take. It says spirit and matter are actually two parts of the same thing, like totally connected. It's not about rejecting the material world, but finding a healthy relationship with it.
That makes sense to me. I used to feel like I had to choose between my spiritual side and having a successful life, in the real world.
The piece talks about that, using money as an example. It says money itself isn't good or bad, it's just a way of exchanging energy. What matters is how we relate to money, how we get it, how we use it, the energy behind it.
So if you earn money doing something you believe in, and you use it to take care of yourself and help others, there's nothing wrong with having money.
Exactly. And that goes for everything, our bodies, our homes, the things we own.
It's about seeing the sacred in everyday things, treating everything with respect, and remembering that it's all connected.
Beautifully said. The piece reminds us that how we take care of our bodies, our homes, the environment, all those everyday actions, those are expressions of our spirituality too.
Wow, that's a new way of looking at it. It's not about separating our lives into spiritual and not spiritual boxes. It's about seeing how everything is connected.
Which brings us right back to that main idea we started with. Everything is interconnected. Our thoughts, actions, relationships, work, the material world, it's all woven together.
So after this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from this piece?
I think it's about bringing awareness and intention to everything we do.
I love that. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present, being open, and remembering that this is a journey.
Well said. And like the piece says, we don't have to do it alone. We can find support in community with other people who are also on this path.
This has been such an amazing journey. Listeners, what resonated with you? What are you inspired to explore?
If it's true that your thoughts shape your reality, what kind of world will you create today? What little things can you do to bring more kindness, more awareness, more intention to your interactions, your work, your relationship with yourself, and the world?
Those are great questions to think about as we continue on our paths. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep living with awareness.